Deborah Sampson was a Massachusetts woman most famously known for disguising herself as a man in order to fight in the Revolutionary Army. But she is also known for being the first woman to earn a full military pension and the first woman to go on a lecture tour of the United States. Deborah Sampson was born on December 17, 1760 in Plimpton, Massachusetts. She was one of 7 kids to her parents Jonathan Sampson and Deborah Bradford Sampson. When Deborah was 5, her father left the family. With Jonathan gone, Deborah's mother struggled financially. This caused Deborah's mom to split up the family. Deborah then was sent to live with relatives until the age of 10, when they could no longer care for her. Then Sampson was forced to become an indentured servant. She worked for the Thomas family in exchange for food, water, and shelter. Though this life seems very rough, Deborah actually learned a lot. The Thomas boys taught her what they learned at school, and the father took her hunting and taught her how to use a gun. The mother of the family taught Deborah how to spin cloth, and Deborah actually became very good at it. The Thomas family took very good care of her until Deborah turned 18. Then she was on her own. Once Deborah moved out, she got a job as a teacher in the summer and a spinner in the winter. Though Deborah never went to school, she was still able to get the job as a teacher because most men were fighting in the Revolutionary War. Then one day, when Deborah was 21, she decided to dress like a man. When none of her neighbors recognized her, she decided to try enlisting in the army. On December 17, 1781, Deborah Sampson first enlisted in the army. Sadly, her attempt failed when she was recognized for being Deborah Sampson the next day. A year later, Deborah's church found out about the incident. They were furious. They accused Deborah of being immoral and took away her church membership. According to Third Baptist Church records, September 3, 1782, consider the case of Deborah Sampson, a member of this church, who last spring was accused of dressing in man's clothing and enlisting as a soldier in the army. And although she was not convicted, yet was strongly suspected of being guilty, and some time before behaved very loose and unchristian-like. It is the church's duty to withdraw fellowship until she returns and makes Christian satisfaction. The only other known source of this is in Abner Weston's diary, who was believed to be Deborah Sampson's neighbor. His diary read, "There happened an uncommon affair at this time for Deborah Sampson, of this town, dressed herself in men's clothes." Despite Sampson's failed attempts, she was eager to enlist in the army. She decided to try again the following spring. In April of 1782, 22-year-old Deborah, dressed in man's clothes, tied down her chest and pulled back her hair once again. But she couldn't try again in this city after what happened. So, Deborah hiked over 100 miles from Middleborough to Worcester, Massachusetts, where no one knew her, and she successfully enlisted in the army. On May 23rd, Deborah became a private in the 4th Massachusetts Regiment. Deborah used the name Robert Shirtloff, the name of her deceased brother. Her term was for 3 years, but it ended at only 18 months when her identity was discovered. But Deborah accomplished so much in those 18 months. She served as a light infantryman in Hudson Valley. Light infantrymen were the most active troops. They were called light infantrymen because they commonly traveled lighter than the other troops. Light infantrymen uniforms were white with red cuffs around the wrists. They had 2 brown sashes they wore over their chest. They wore a black hat with 2 blue feathers on top of the hat. So this is what Deborah wore while serving in the army. Then, in June of 1782, Deborah Sampson, alongside 2 sergeants, led 30 infantrymen into a battle that resulted in confrontation with loyalists. Sampson also led a raid on the home of Tories. This ended with the capture of 15 British men. When Deborah wasn't leading raid battles, she was protecting the siege of Yorktown. There, she helped storm a British redoubt. She dug trenches and even endured cannon fire. Despite close calls, Sampson was successfully disguising her true sex. For example, when she was shot in her thigh, she had to extract the pistol ball herself to avoid her identity being discovered. It wasn't until the summer of 1783, when Deborah Sampson fell ill on a mission in Philadelphia, that her true sex was discovered. Dr. Barnabas Binney discovered her true sex while treating her. Dr. Binney later revealed her secret to General Patterson via a letter. Then, after a year and a half of serving in the military, Deborah Sampson was honorably discharged by Henry Knox on October 25, 1783. After the war, Deborah continued the life of many young girls, and in 1785, Deborah got married to Benjamin Gannett, a Massachusetts farmer. Then, after petitioning many times, Deborah was rewarded with a small military pension. After that, she settled down with her husband in Sharon, Massachusetts, and had 3 kids. But soon after, publishers started reaching out to her, and in 1797, the Female Review was published. Then, in 1802, Deborah started traveling the United States to do lecture tours, making her the first woman to go on a lecture tour of the United States. Sadly, on April 29, 1827, Deborah Sampson died. But Sampson's legacy lived on in books and schools where kids would learn about her for years to come. In 1838, Sampson's family was rewarded with a full military pension for Sampson's service. Later, a statue of Deborah Sampson was built in Sharon, Massachusetts, to remember what she did for the city and what she did for the country. Deborah Sampson changed the way society looked at women. She proved that being a woman doesn't mean you can't fight for what you believe in. Deborah became highly respected for her service. She was allowed to go on lecture tours, which no woman has ever done up to that point. And most importantly, she inspired other women to break barriers and fight for what they believe in.